Hi, welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I'm working on a little project. I'm in my library, as you can see. This is where I usually film, but I'm usually sitting like over there. And my library is a disaster, as you can probably see, and this happens every single time, essentially, that there is like my birthday or Christmas or I go book shopping or whatever, things accumulate. And it's even worse right now because I pulled off all the books for like my classics TBR for the year and like all kinds of stuff like that. I have favorite books or books that I've read within the past couple of months that I've not reshelved. So it's looking pretty bad, but that's not all I'm doing. I'm not just reorganizing my library. I've done videos like that before. I did one last fall where I decorated for fall. I'm not swapping out any decorations because it's still winter time. And I think the only winter decoration I have up is that snowman right there. Anyways, I have been wanting to count my physical TBR for quite some time to figure out how many books I own that I've not yet read. And there are a lot of books on these shelves that I plan to read within the next year or couple of years. So I don't feel bad about having a lot of books that I haven't read, especially because I have shared in the past, my local library system is very limited in that it's a small rural library. The interlibrary loan is only within our county, and our county is very rural. So as a result, if I go somewhere where I find great deals on books where books are 25 cents or 50 cents or $1, and I'm like, oh, I might want to read that, I tend to snatch them up because I don't know if I'll be able to get them physically otherwise without spending more. While that's not entirely a bad thing, I do have, other resources at my disposal, especially in terms of classics. I have Project Gutenberg where I can get classics for free for my Kindle. And I do have like library options as well in terms of like digital media, even though I have a limited access to physical media. So what I want to do today is I want to count my physical TBR and also be a little bit ruthless in unhauling as I'm reorganizing my shelves. And that's painful for me to say because I don't like getting rid of books that I think I might read at some point or something like that. I'm like, oh, but what if I get rid of it and then someone hosts a readathon of that exact book? So I'm going to try to not care about that, but I am also going to like look before I get rid of like certain classics on my shelves. Like, are they available on Project Gutenberg? Could I get them at the drop of a hat if I decide to read them sooner rather than later? So I will be investigating that as I go throughout, but my plan is not only to clean my shelves and reorganize my books and also count my physical TBR. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be sharing with you all the books that I'm getting rid of as I'm deciding to get rid of them in real time. And then at the end, I am going to give you a physical TBR number, even though that might be kind of embarrassing. If you've been here for a little while and you've seen my previous bookshelf tours, you know that in this room is middle grade and classics, and that's it. In fact, there are more middle grade in my daughter's room as well. She has lots of middle grade in there, but in my bedroom, I have my sci-fi and fantasy and my YA and my historical fiction books. And then I have another section like in our family room that has all of my nonfiction. Those are the plans, and yeah, come along with me. Okay, I am 2 shelves in. And I have for sure one I want to get rid of and 2 I'm considering. So the first one is Louisa May Alcott's The Inheritance. I have a ton of Louisa May Alcott on my shelf. I have read this one and I did not think it was very good. It was one of my most disappointing reads of last year. Then I have a few Albert Camus books. I have The Stranger and I am keeping that one for sure because I want to read it at some point. And then I'm like, but everyone says it's really weird. Maybe I'll really like it. And if I like it, am I going to be disappointed if I get rid of his others? So I have The Fall, which I don't know anything about at all. And then I have this one, which is The Myth of Sisyphus and Other Essays. And all of the essays seem to be themed around Greek mythology, which is why I was interested in it. But it also has a lot to do with like suicide and whether life is worth living and if there can be any meaning found in the universe at all. And I don't know if I want to read that. Okay, I have a bunch more already, and I'm only one more shelf down. So one of these is just, actually two of them are because I don't like the format of the book. So one of them is O Pioneers by Willa Cather, and I actually do have an anthology of hers that also has O Pioneers in it. I would like to have it separately, but this is like a really poorly laid out one because it's public domain. It was printed really poorly, and I ordered it online not knowing that I was ending up with something that was just like not good. And then I also had purchased this at McKay's like a while back, Man and Wife by Wilkie Collins, which I do want to read at some point. But this is also laid out so weird. It's like a Bible. You see that? It's got like 4 columns and it's so tiny, and I would absolutely hate to read out of this. I can get this on Project Gutenberg, or I can get a better edition of it at some point. Maybe this one is controversial, but I'm getting rid of Robinson Crusoe. I have this beautiful edition with deckled edges. I read it out loud to my daughter a couple of years for school, and I didn't like it very much at all. I found it utterly and completely boring for the most part, and I would have DNF'd it so fast if I was reading it on my own. My daughter actually really enjoyed it, so maybe I'll ask her if she wants to keep it for herself, but I don't really want it on my shelves anymore. I have the Canterbury Tales, and the thing is, this is tiny, so this is a retold and abridged version. So if I'm going to read it, I should probably read the original. Also, I have 2 Stephen Cranes that I've never read. I've had the Red Badge of Courage since I was like really young and never even been interested in picking it up. I've heard it's a great book, so nothing against it, but I did check and see that Project Gutenberg also has that and other Stephen Cranes, as well as like all his Civil War short stories. So I will probably maybe read these at some point, but I don't really care whether or not I physically read them or whether or not I own them. Okay, I have another little stack to share. So first I have The Blithedale Romance by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I found that I'm not a huge fan of Nathaniel Hawthorne's novels, although I do still own Marble Fawn, which I want to read at some point, partly because it's a really beautiful antique edition. So I'm holding on to that one, and I'm holding on to The Scarlet Letter first for its like importance, and also because I did enjoy that one when I read it in high school. Am I going to pick up another Hawthorne novel of my own volition? Kind of doubt it. Also, I have Obeloff, which was one of my most disappointing books of last year, so I don't need to keep it on my shelf. I also have The Man in the Iron Mask by Alexandre Dumas. This is one of the sequels to The Three Musketeers, which I have read and I didn't love, but I read it when I was a young adult, so I want to reread it. The reason why I'm getting rid of this is because it's like a mass market paperback, so I don't know if I even want to read it at all because I'd have to reread The Three Musketeers first. But if I do want to read it, I probably don't want to read it in this edition. I also have this book, Castle Door, which I've never heard anything about at all. The reason why I picked it up is it was like a library book sale, and so I got it for like 25 cents or something. And it's written by Daphne du Maurier and someone else who I've never heard of. Am I ever going to read this? Probably not. And lastly is a book I do want to read at some point, but I got it recently, Ruth by Elizabeth Gaskell. So I picked this up out of the free bin in McKay's because they couldn't sell it because this is a public domain book, and as a result it's like this big giant like humongous book, not even by a reputable publisher, so it's just like not a good format. I was just thinking like if I'm gonna sit there and read it, like it is so big and I'm not gonna enjoy reading it out of this edition. Again, available on Project Gutenberg, or I can purchase a different edition. Okay, daylight is waning a bit, so there might be a change in lighting from video clips. I'm now through S, so I'm going to tell you some of the things I got rid of. Actually, this one is actually C, Don Quixote by Cervantes. I actually have a Penguin version of this, and although this was the version I was reading in before, I think I'd rather have the notes in the Penguin edition to help me understand it better, and also like the print is tiny in these, even though these Macmillan classics are so cute. I have a lot of Melville here, which is kind of a shame. So I have this really pretty edition of Moby Dick, and I do plan to read Moby Dick, but I also have the Penguin edition of this, and I'd rather have the Penguin edition, and I don't think I'm gonna love it enough that I want multiple editions of it. I have some of his other ones I picked up at a library book sale for like 25 cents, so no harm, no foul here. But I have Omu and Tai Chi, and both of these are very like about him sailing to other places, like they're based on his actual experiences, and I feel like I'm not going to enjoy them. I'm also getting rid of Mallory's Arthur, and there's two reasons for this. First of all, again, it is on Project Gutenberg. I would like to read it at some point, but not only is this like a really beat up edition that's actually like the binding's falling apart, but it's only one volume and I don't have the other volumes. I'm getting rid of this book, A House for Mr. Biswas. I don't know anything about it. Never heard anyone talk about it. I just noticed it was one of like the Penguin modern classics, like it says 20th century classics. So it was published in the 60s. I don't know anything about it at all. I only picked it up because I was at a bookstore where it was fill a bag for $1 and I was like, oh, well, I'm not paying any more to get it, so I did. But like, I have never thought about it again since. Also have a Jean Stratton Porter, which was another disappointing book of last year. I considered hanging on to it because it does have some really, really beautiful moments. Maybe my daughter would want to read it at some point, but she still hasn't even read Girl of the Limberlast. And last but not least in this section, I have this really beautiful bind up that has Faulkner O'Neill and Steinbeck in it. And the reason why I'm not keeping this is because the Steinbeck is like a Steinbeck I own elsewhere, but the reason why I picked it up is because I got it at a thrift store and has As I Lay Dying in it by Faulkner, which is the only Faulkner I've read and actually like enjoyed and would like to reread at some point. And it also has A Rose for Emily, which I would like to read but have not yet read. But it's like, I've never read anything by O'Neill. I've never even heard anyone talk about O'Neill. If I'm gonna reread As I Lay Dying, I don't really want to do it out of an edition that has a whole bunch of other stuff in it. That's it for that little section. So I'm down through the shelf right here. So I'll check back in with you soon. And I just realized that I forgot to plug in the thing for this microphone to work. So the audio might be kind of wonky in this section and not match the rest of it, but I'm not going to refilm it because I've been talking for like 5 minutes now. Okay, I totaled up my classics, my unread classics. I actually don't know how many classics I have total. Maybe I should have counted that as well. But it's like all of these shelves. Let me see if I can turn this. All of these and all of these. So it fits a lot of books, especially when you see that I have stacks like this in front. So anyways, I have 167 unread classics. I feel slightly better about the fact that I have 20 of those classics that I have definite plans to read this year, and several others that are like, maybe, but 20 of them are scheduled to be read at some point this year, some of them even at some point in February. So that makes me feel a tiny bit better, but that number was worse than I thought. Okay, I have finished the middle grade section now. I didn't update you periodically as to what I was getting rid of or not, so I'm just going to share it all at once. I don't want this video to be 3 hours long, so I'm just going to kind of like very briefly show you what I'm getting rid of. Listening for Lions by Gloria Whelan. 2 Cornelia Funk books. I've read both of them and didn't love either of them. I'm keeping My Side of the Mountain even though I haven't read it yet, but I don't feel the need to keep the sequels, so I'm getting rid of those. I have Fish in a Tree, which I have read but didn't love. The Shiloh series, which was never read. Summer of the Monkeys, also never read. Carry On Mr. Bowditch. 5 Little Peppers, which I feel like is past where Claire is right now, and I never got around to reading it out loud to her. Several Margaret Peterson Haddock's books in a series, never got the whole series. Claire's not interested in reading it, and that's why I bought them. Swiss Family Robinson, I just don't like how giant this edition is. The same is true for this Captain's Courageous version. It's kind of like the exact same thing. Rascal by Storling North. Children of the New Forest, which we read for school, and I thought it was so boring. Puck of Pook's Hill, which surprisingly my daughter's not interested in reading. I have several Redwall books. None of them are the first book. Claire started the first book and didn't really like it, so I don't really see a need to keep these other 3 random ones. Save at Night by Gail Carson Levine. We have tons of her books, and this is the only one that's leaving. Stowaway by Karen Hess, which is a recent haul that I got for like 10 cents, 25 cents, but I looked through it and I'm just not as interested as I was by The Great Horned Spoon, which was for school, never read it. I've read The Penderwicks, and I bought it for my daughter, and she's not really interested. Of classics, The Enormous Egg and the Millie Molly Mandy storybook, which both books that my daughter enjoyed when she was younger, and not so much now. Enchanted Air, which was on my reader read project like last year or the year before. The Cabin Faced West, The Black Stallion, a couple of Julie Andrews books, Mandy, and the last of the really great Wang Doodles. I've had these on my shelves for, gosh, like probably almost a decade, and yet none of us have ever picked them up. The Copper-Toed Boots by Margaret D'Angeli. I love The Door in the Wall, but never really been interested in this one. And I think that's it. So I did count my middle grade, and I would say I have as many or close to as many middle grade as I do classics, but I only have 46 of them unread. And out of the 46 that are unread, I didn't count, but there's quite a few of them that I'm not really interested in reading that I purchased for my daughter. But there are some that I have that I am really interested in reading. Like I said, there's more middle grade books that are in my daughter's room. I will not count any of those whether or not I've read them because they're not books that are for me. Most of them are books that either I purchased for her or other people purchased for her or sent to her, or ones that she bought with her own money. So to me, those books do not count in the grand scheme or total of books that I have not read. Anyways, I am going to stop for today, but I will come back on a different day and go through like some of my other books and update you, and like so I can have a grand total of all of the unread books on my TBR that I have in my house. Hello, it is actually sometime later and I'm coming at you with my next set of bookshelves that I'm going to tackle. I decided I'm not going to like unhaul or count my nonfiction in the total of this video for a couple of reasons. First of all, a lot of the nonfiction that I have are either ones that my husband purchased or I purchased for him, or ones that I'm going to use for my daughter and like upper levels of homeschooling. And so as a result, I don't feel like I have to read those anytime soon because they will get read eventually. So these are the last shelves that I'm tackling. These are the shelves in my bedroom, in case you couldn't tell. If you watch any of my vlogs, I usually sit like right there on my side of the bed and talk about vlogging. But in this room, I have done a bookshelf tour of this too, so I'll link that in case you want to see it. I have all my sci-fi, fantasy, historical fiction, and translated fiction over here. And then over here, I have mysteries, YA, and like Christian fiction. So a lot of books in here aren't ones that I pull from a whole bunch because I'm definitely much more focused on reading classics. Most of the time, that just tends to be kind of like what I'm in the mood for. So there are definitely like lots of books in here that I have read. So we'll see how bad my totals are here. I do know that I have a lot of historical fiction that I've purchased and not read. So those will be going on like my physical TBR total or being unhauled. So I'll come back and share with you what I'm getting rid of. Okay, that was like the fastest sort through that I've had of any genre, probably because I have less in here. I do have like some big stacks of books that I am getting rid of. So let's do that first. I am getting rid of Mistborn Era 2, which is shocking. I don't know that I've really gotten rid of very many Brandon Sandersons, if any. But I did read these last summer, and I'm really glad that I read them, but I don't foresee myself like really wanting to reread them anytime super soon. And if I do, there's always the library. Another Sanderson that I'm getting rid of is one that I never picked up, and it was actually on my reader read project last year, and I never read it, but I was like, oh, I'll hang on to it for now. And now I'm like, am I actually going to read this? And that's Legion. This is like, I think it's more kind of like sci-fi, and it's very different from his other books, not connected to the Cosmere, which is fine. Something doesn't have to be connected to the Cosmere for me to like it, but I just like, I don't know that I care. I've actually never really heard anyone say that they actually love this book. At best, I've heard people say like, oh, it was fine or it was fun. I've never heard anyone be like, oh, I love this Sanderson book. So I probably don't need it. Another series I'm getting rid of is I have the last 4 books, not the first one, but the last 4 books of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I read book 1 over a year ago, and while I thought it was fun and while I like enjoyed it, I've never enjoyed it enough to want to go on in the series. Like, I got all of these at my library because they were giving them away. It was on a free cart because people hadn't checked them out. And so I was like, well, I might as well pick them up. Like, maybe I'll continue on. But I noticed when I was going through my shelf, like last year when I read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I didn't put it as like series I had started or were reading in my book journal, and I didn't put it in this year. And I'm like, if I'm not even like keeping track of this at all, like I'm not going to get to these. All right, moving on to historical fiction. I am keeping a lot of the historical fiction that I have because I did buy them because I was interested in them, with the exception of this. And it's not that I'm not interested in this. I might still read this at some point. But if I'm being totally honest, I picked these books up at McKay's because of the hype, and that's Hall and then The Mirror and the Light. This is not like a period of history, like this is about Cromwell. It's not a period of history that I'm particularly invested in. Like a lot of the other historical fiction books that I have are set in an era or in a country that I'm like, oh my gosh, I really, really want to read this at some point. This I don't feel that much about, like the same way. I've heard a lot of people say it's so well written and it's so good, so I might still read it at some point. But like, do I need to own it? Another historical fiction is The Personal Librarian, and this is about someone who curated a library for J.P. Morgan. So I picked this up at a library book sale also for like 25 cents. So there's really no real loss here in getting rid of this particular book. But it was a favorite book of the year by someone that I knew. And I was like, okay, I'm really interested. And that same person also like really highly recommended Mr. Dickens and His Carol to me. And maybe you remember or maybe you don't, my feelings that I had on that when I read it last December. Like, it was so historically inaccurate and I just hated almost everything about it. It was one of my most disappointing books of the year. And I've since realized that that person who recommended both of those books to me is someone who doesn't share a similar taste in reading to me overall. So I'm just gonna bring it to my case. I only have one work of translated literature, which is like that stack right there. But the only translated fiction that I'm actually getting rid of is Please Look After Mom, which I read a couple years ago for co-readathon. I still really liked it, but as I was looking at my shelves, I'm like, I don't think I will ever reread this, even though I enjoyed it at the time. So it's going bye-bye. So for mysteries, I have a bunch of Maisie Dobbs books, and I have the first one, but then I have like some really random ones. I don't even know what number they are. Pardonable Lies, Birds of a Feather, and The Sunlit Women. And like these three I got at a library book sale, again for like 25 cents each, so not a big loss. I was like, oh well, they're getting rid of them. These are ex-library copies. They're getting rid of them. I won't be able to easily access them, which is kind of not true because I have so much access to like digital media, so it's not as big of a deal that my library doesn't carry as much that I might want in backlisted books physically. But at the time I was like, oh, well, I might actually read Maisie Dobbs. I might want them. But I've since found out that Maisie Dobbs is like an incredibly long series, and it is mysteries, but it's also historical fiction, like about a nurse or something. And I'm just like, maybe I will still start this at some point, but I'm in the middle of so many series that I can't see myself starting a historical fiction mystery series, which are two genres that I don't read a ton of. Not that I'm adverse to either of them. They're just not the genres that I tend to gravitate towards. So I have YA, like this shelf and this shelf are all like entirely YA. I'm keeping most of those, and I have actually read almost all of them. So when I'm looking at my physical TBR, like there are some YA that I haven't read, and some of them I'm not sure if I will read. Like I have the Aragon books. I don't know that I'm really interested in reading those, but I think my daughter would really like them. So I've held on to them, and I will continue to hold on to them because I want to have good quality YA literature ready for her when she hits that age. So the one that I'm getting rid of is another Brandon Sanderson, and it's Steelheart. This is book one in a trilogy, a YA trilogy that he wrote a long time ago. Again, not connected to Cosmere in any way at all. And I haven't heard anything great about these. Like, most people are like, they were fine. And that's the most positive thing that I've heard about. I don't even know what The Reckoners. That's what the series is called. So I'm like, I don't really care. So I did keep all of the Skyward books. They're actually the ones that are right here. And I didn't finish that series, and I'm not going to because I just don't like it that much. But I think that my daughter might really enjoy it when she gets a little bit older. So yeah, so I actually did also include those books and Aragon in my like total, but maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I'll adjust that because I'm not including middle grade that she owns that I haven't read. So maybe I don't need to do that for YA either. My last little stack here is from my Christian fiction. I'm hanging on to most of it, and to be honest, I'm pretty sure almost all of it is Ted Dekker and Frank Peretti books that I read when I was younger and really enjoyed. I've found as I've gotten older, I'm not really a very big fan of Ted Dekker anymore. I've reread Frank Peretti's books. They still hold up great for me. I still enjoy them. Something about Ted Dekker's writing style doesn't click for me the same way it did when I was a teenager, but I'm still hanging on to them because I think that my daughter would really enjoy them. Except I'm getting rid of this series. It's the Martyr Songs series. And I remember even as a teenager not liking these that much. I thought that they were okay. And I held on to them only because I'm like, what if I want to reread them? What if Claire wants to read them? And now I'm like, you know what? There are better Ted Dekker books that she can read that I own. So I'm not going to worry about that. So I'm getting rid of these. So those are all the books that I'm getting rid of from these shelves. So I've totaled up in the genres my total like physical TBR, which are books that I physically own but have not read and want to. I decided I was going to take off those YA books that I mentioned because I don't think I'm going to pick them up and I don't really want to. I'm saving them for my daughter, so they feel like they shouldn't count for my personal physical TBR. So sci-fi and fantasy, I have 19 books on my physical TBR because there's a lot in this section that I have not read. For historical fiction, I have 12 books that I haven't read there. For translated literature, I have 7. For YA, I have 6. And for mystery, I have 1. And it's actually one that is assigned for my daughter in school next year. So I will be reading it within the next year. So total in this room of unread physical TBR is 46 books. So I just added up my grand total. And it's kind of embarrassing. My total of physically owned unread books on my TBR is 259 books. So that's a lot. So I need to get cracking. I'm going to try to, in general, I'm trying to purchase less books this year and not get books just because like maybe I would want to read them at some point. I only want to get books and I'm like, this sounds like something I would love, or this is something I've wanted to read for a while, or I want to get this for a read along. And I'm still like totally allowing myself to read as much from the library and things like that as I want. So it's not like I'm limiting myself to only read books that I own, but I do want to stop like an influx of books. We're going to see how that goes this year. Maybe I can report to you at the end of the year how my physical TBR has changed, because I did add a tracking page in my bullet journal, my book journal, so that way I can keep track of it throughout the year, and hopefully I can update you at the end of the year, and hopefully this number is much lower. I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. How is your physical TBR looking? Please tell me. Please tell me I am not alone, because it seems like, I don't know, I saw a meme one time that said that book buying and book reading are 2 totally different hobbies. And in a sense, that feels like that's true, even though I read a lot. I read over 100 books a year, but that doesn't mean I don't still keep buying books. So I know that some of you I have talked to and your physical TBR is so low and you are so good about reading the books that you actually own and not continually bringing in more. And so kudos to you. Your self-control is so much stronger than I am, but I really hope that I'm not alone. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again next time.